Welcome to the Stepmom Side with Alicia Crasco, the podcast for stepmoms ready to create the life they want and one they actually have a say in. Here we talk all things stepmom life and just a little bit more. Leave the superficial conversations at the door and get ready for perspective shifts and actionable advice to help you on your way to creating the life you want, one step at a time. Hi, JP. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Oh my gosh, I'm super excited to have you here because before we get into that, my audience may or may not know you.
hmm
Who are you? What do you have going on? And 30
I
seconds
am.
less.
I'm a single dad that has raised my daughter most of her life. She's 9. She was 2 when me and her mother split up, and we've been co-parenting almost her entire life, and have gone from more conflict to the whole big blended family with everybody involved kind of situation over the last 5-6 years has been pretty smooth. And then it seems like that should be the way that most are, and then the outliers should be the ones that are at each other's throats and using kids as weapons. And so I do a lot of coaching and speaking and advocating for the simple, peaceful benefits of just fucking getting along.
Yeah.
You know?
Right. It's so hard to, I find some people are, it's really hard. There's a lot of
hmm
involved, and I'm sure we'll get into this. So key players now in your situation, have you repartnered?
I was in a relationship up until like 6-7 months ago.
Okay. And then your ex, is she repartnered at all?
My daughter's in a blended family. And
Okay.
so it's my daughter, her mother, unmarried stepdad, basically,
Okay.
his son,
Okay, cool.
and then, but when we do, we're at the point where we all do barbecues in the summer, like
Oh,
4th
yeah.
of July is coming up. So we'll all be barbecuing, doing fireworks at the same place, but it's me, their blended family, plus his ex, her husband, and their baby. And then
Oh, okay.
obviously some other families, you know what I mean? It's not
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
it's only us that are hanging out barbecuing, that kind of deal, but it's just not a thing. Some holidays we'll get together, especially these kinds of holidays. Thanksgivings and Christmases are a little bit different, obviously, because you get a little more travel involved with some of those other holidays and the spring break and the vacations and this and that. But the lake days during the summer, and if everybody's doing Thanksgiving in the same town, we'll all kind of do it together. No big deal, that kind of stuff.
Okay. So take me back to the beginning when you guys
hmm
separated when your daughter was 2. What was going on there that made your situation not great
Before or after?
after?
Uh,
Or wait, why did you guys end up splitting up?
it just
You can give
it,
me like a high level.
when my daughter was born, my priorities shifted a ton. What was important, what wasn't important, the direction I wanted my life to go, and all these different things. And so I drastically changed my life. Not that I was like a stellar partner or role model to be, I'm not saying like anything like that, or putting, my daughter's mother down by any means, but it just got to a point where we weren't happy together. And so she was getting to the age I felt where it was either I need to make the decision on whether or not I want to stay in this sort of a relationship and have this kind of a life where I'm unhappy and unfulfilled. And if she gets any older, then it's going to be harder and harder to leave, because at this point, she won't remember
hmm
the nuclear family, and this will be all she knows. But when she's 5, 6, and that's when you'll start getting the psychological downfalls of kids where they feel like it's their fault.
hmm
I'm the reason that my parents aren't happy or split up. And I just didn't want to subject her to that her
Yeah.
entire childhood.
Yeah.
But in my mind, I always felt that 2 happy homes were always going to be a better situation than 1 miserable home. You know what I mean? Like, I grew up in a
100%.
place where my parents were more roommates than a married couple. And there wasn't a lot of love, and there wasn't a lot of encouragement. I mean, from anybody to anybody. I mean, it was just a very just disconnected household. right? And I didn't want my daughter to grow up in that same kind of a household because I knew that that's kind of, you do what you know and what you've learned and what you've witnessed. And so I would probably end up disconnecting, and then wouldn't be able to be the father that I wanted to be.
Look at you breaking cycles. Okay, yeah, like we have
Right.
the same childhood, and that is so hard to like get out of that mindset because it's just like,
Mm-hmm.
well, this is what I was brought up in, this is what I know.
Right.
It's comfortable for like lack of a better word, but like
Right.
like this is not what I want to do. Okay, so you guys
Yeah.
split up, and
Mm-hmm.
then what happens?
If I'm being honest, more times than not, it's going to start with you. Right.
Hmm.
So, like, was I the co parent that I wanted my daughter's mother to be? No. You know what I mean? Like, same as like if you're looking for a new partner in a relationship, are you the partner that you're looking for? You
Hmm.
know what I mean? Are you the person that you're trying to attract? If not, figure out why, and do the things that you need to do. But a lot of it was, when I work with a lot of people, there's three main deals that I've figured out that sort of runs parallel. Doesn't matter if you're the mom or the dad, you broke up with that person, they broke up with you, da 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 da. And the biggest hurdle that people just can't seem to get is you got to leave your own pity party and get out of your own fucking way.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Okay, so if you're listening to this, can and somebody is like, wait, what did he just say? Can you just repeat that? Because I think it's so freaking true. Oh my gosh, yeah.
You got to leave your own pity party and just get out of your own way, because more times than not, it's the action reaction, the
Uh,
tit for tat. You got two people throwing gas on one fire, and then you're both expecting the fire to go out. You know what I mean? And it's just it doesn't work that way. And when I quit being a baby and quit being instantly defensive at everything that she would text me and say to me, the fights got dwindled and dwindled and dwindled. And then when I stopped engaging, when I stopped instigating and being defensive and sort of, you know, one of the ones that comes to mind all the time is, we weren't married, so we don't have any court stuff. We didn't have to go through the system. Everything we've done, we figured out on our own. And so the weekdays that I would have my daughter, she'd just text me, midday sometime, and what time are you getting off work? What time are you going to pick her up? Something simple, right? But if you're in this space where you're still sulking in this anger or resentment or pity party or whatever, to me, I would instantly get defensive. It's like, well, I'm basically home between 4 and 6 during the week, depending on how far the job site is, da 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 da. And so, like, I'd get defensive. Well, I'll let you know when I'm leaving work. And then it would turn into something snappy back, and then it would go back and forth, and it turned into more of an argument. And then by the time I got there to pick my daughter up, she's pissed, I'm pissed, and nothing's moving forward. And when I got out of that headspace and could see the entire situation clearly, like, she doesn't really give two shits what time I'm getting off work or what time I'm going to pick my daughter up. She's trying to figure out if she can make whatever she wants to for dinner and doesn't have to worry about feeding my daughter, or if I'm going to be there early enough to take my daughter and I'm going to feed my daughter. And so, like, she can either cook meals that she wants to eat that my daughter won't eat and not have to cook two meals, you know what I mean?
mhm.
Or she'll know that I'm going to be there early enough to pick her up and she'll eat with me and she can cook whatever you know what I mean? Like, but me being defensive and me being a baby created the entire situation that would stew and just turn into this, like, arguing and then bitterness and then probably a big explosion fight 3 days later because we both been stewing on the other shit that was said throughout the rest of that day.
Wait, this happens to you too.
Yeah, yeah.
Wait,
And
okay. Let me ask you
so
this.
yeah,
Why
yeah.
were you defensive and why were you acting like a baby? Because I see this. I saw this in my own relationship. My husband
Mm-hmm,
was quite defensive. Not so much with the ex, but with me. Like if I brought up
mm-hmm,
something like, hey, the kids are X, Y, and Z. But I see this with stepmoms I coach too. Like my husband is always, or my partner is always so defensive. Like I can't
mm-hmm.
break through that. And so I work with them on like, try these phrases, or try this or try that. And it's like, they're always just like this. So talk me through like, why are you what's going on? What's happening? Why are you defensive? Why are you acting like a baby? Why are you in your own feels? Why is the ego driving the bus? What's happening?
Well, I think the biggest hurdle is, at least for me, and I mean this is probably going to be probably fairly true or relatable to most men,
Okay.
but men and women, I guess. Until I reframed the way I viewed my daughter's mother, I couldn't get out of viewing her as what she was at the end of the relationship. So,
Okay.
like, what I mean is like when I talk about my daughter's mother, I never say my ex. And if I start to, I'll usually catch myself and stop, because that's not who she is in my life. You know what I mean? And it wasn't until I basically let the relationship die, grieved it, did the work I needed to get through my baggage and traumas, and I mean, like, not just from that relationship, from all relationships I've had from childhood. Like, I mean, I had to like deconstruct my entire life to figure out why I would put up with certain things that I had to in relationships to make myself feel like I was deserving of love. And I mean, there was a whole
Yeah.
big, long
Hi.
train ride that
Been
I
there
had to
too.
embark on. But the less that I could look, the easier it got. And when things started getting better was when I stopped looking at her like my ex, the girl that hurt me, that was mean to me, that split up our family, or I split up that, you know what I mean? Like, all of it's in the past, and you got to let it go, and you got to get over yourself and get over the relationship and let it end. Because if you're mentally in that space of that's my ex and not the mother of my children, then you're constantly seeing them through the lens of the anger or the shame or the failed relationship or what they did to you or if they cheated or da 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 da. And you're making every decision and all of your thoughts are running through that filter as opposed to who they are as a parent.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And so the more that I was doing it to her, the more that she was doing it to me. And it gave me more slack to be the father that I want to be, because I got more trust, because she wasn't looking at me like I was her ex-boyfriend. She was looking at me as the father of her child. And I look at her as the mother of my child.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she was responsible enough to have the child with, and she was responsible enough to be, you know what I mean? Like, you see a lot of these things where just because they got divorced, they can't get out of that space. And then now all of a sudden, like, the dad's unfit to be around the children if mom's not there.
Right.
But like when they were married, it was no big deal for her to take a weekend trip with her parents and leave all the kids at home with him the entire time. You know what I mean? Like, now
Yeah.
all of a sudden, I don't think his parenting has changed, but your grasp of control has changed, because now you're not in that relationship to be able to control him, but you still want that control.
Yeah.
So this is how you're doing it, because you're still stuck in this place of mentally, you're still stuck in the past in this relationship. And that's not the reality that you're in anymore. Changing the way you view that person is probably as important as anything else, because if you're looking in the rearview mirror, you're not looking at the road. You're not going forward.
I love that mindset because I feel like we've already covered like things that I like do in coaching. So many times in coaching, everyone's got cutesy names for the ex. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
listen, let's not use this name that you've come up with. Let's
Right.
use her name. And
Right.
right, like it humanizes them. And if you,
Right.
same thing, like I don't ever say my husband's ex when I'm
Right.
talking about his ex-wife. That's my stepkid's mom, or I use her name,
Mm-hmm.
or I call her the mom, which is also controversial, right? Like, because that's what she is.
Right.
I don't differentiate bio mom. She's just the mom, like she's
Right.
the mom. But I think you're 100% right in the sense of you've got to get out of that mindset of my partner's ex or my whatever, like the ex,
Right.
and just it's my stepkid's mom because
Right.
I know it sounds ridiculous to say like it's just a few words that you're changing, but the mindset is totally different. And if you can get
Right.
out of using that name and just use
Right.
her name or the mom, and from a stepmom perspective, so we didn't think that we were gonna have kids together. So I was a child-free stepmom. And then like
Right.
one day I was like, oh my gosh, like I actually really want my own kid. And it just like came out and it was like not in a good way. And so then I was a childless stepmom until we had our daughter. And it was really hard to just say their mom or the mom, especially when I was in that transitioning stage, because what I wanted more than anything was to have my own kid. And so it was like salt in a wound for me because I was like, I want my own kid and I'm parenting or helping parent somebody else's kid. So it was just like,
Mhm.
let me just peel open this gushing wound and like just put a
Right.
ton of salt in there, right? And so I understand, like, I have a lot of empathy for stepmoms that are going through that, that are like, but that's really what I want. So I can't even say their mom. And I'm like, okay,
Right.
use her name.
Right. Well, you get into situations too, the the stepmom realm is it's not really my area of expertise, we'll say. You know what I mean? Like
Shocking. You're a dad.
well, yeah, and like, my daughter's got the stepdad thing, but
Yeah.
we live 6 blocks away from each other. My daughter comes and goes as she pleases. He's not burdened by financial responsibility, any sort of authority, any of this shit. Da, 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 da. You know what I mean? Like but if she's home alone and he's there, like he's the boss, right? You listen to adults, raise your kid right, have respect for people, that kind of stuff. I still get the text messages from my daughter's mother. It says like, I got an email from the school today. You need to have a talk with your daughter. You know what I mean? Like I still get that's it is what it is. With the cutesy names for the stepmom, for the mother, you know what I mean, as a stepmother. It'd be the same with the stepdad. You know what I mean? If I referred to him as shitbrick off fucking American Pie or something, you know what I mean? Like, one, you're just putting up a huge billboard of how immature you are, insecure you are, because the most insecure people have to put other people down. The arrogance that you think you are so fucking perfect that you can sit there and have some nickname for their parent that most people aren't aware enough to not filter it. And so you're sitting there doing that in front of their kids, right? How are you going to expect that child to bond and love you? Because ultimately every kid thinks that they're 50% mom, 50% dad, right? Well, if you hate mom, you hate half of me. How are you going to expect that kid to bond with you as a step parent?
Mm-hmm.
If you can't even show respect to half of them, mentally, and most of it's probably subconscious. I don't think that they'd necessarily be aware of it. But every time you insult the mom or the dad of the kid that, you're essentially the bonus mom, bonus dad, whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
But you're sitting there putting them down all the time in their mind. I mean, their emotional being is taking it like that.
Yeah.
Because they consciously think that they're half mom, half dad. So if you're sitting there talking shit about mom or dad in front of them or around them or to other people in the presence of the kids and that kind of stuff, like they're taking all those hits too. You're punching them just as much as you're beating up on the other parent. But you're also showing them that that's how adults act.
Mm-hmm.
You're also teaching them that that's how you're basically teaching your stepkids how to be a mean girl. So then when they're 12, 13, 14 years old, oh, where does all this shit come from? I don't know where they learned this. Well, they've been a punching bag and watched stepmom or stepdad sit there and belittle and talk about real mom behind her back nonstop. It shows that you're insecure in your relationship because you have to keep some sort of a wedge between bio mom and your husband because you think maybe he'll go back or they have some sort of emotional bond. And I would assume that probably it may be more evident or, happen more often when stepmom and dad don't have a child together, because obviously mom and, bio mom and husband have had a stronger connection or bond than you have with them because they have children together. And so now you're lacking in your relationship because you're not on par with X. And so you got to put X down in order to stand up on their shoulders. You know what I mean? I'm sure there's a lot of different ways that you can look at it, but like those are a couple that come to my mind right off the bat.
That's 100% right. And I see that so often. I felt like that too, because granted my stepkids are adopted, but like they had a kid together. They had two kids together, and like we don't have anything together. And then there's all of these societal pressures of like, oh, you're not a woman unless you reproduce or you have your own kids, or then you've got the in-laws that come in and are like, oh, we like her more because she gave us grandkids, or like, how dare you like try to parent. I have like goosebumps telling you this. Like, how dare you try to come in and try to be a mom when you don't even have kids of your own? Like, how could you like, you know, so there's all of this bullshit that you have to like sift through as a stepmom. And then like, I'm just here to like help out. Like, I'm sorry that I fell in love with somebody that like has an ex and has kids, but like, I'm not trying to be the bad guy. If you would let me play, I'm actually on your team. Like, I'm here to help out. Like, what is going on? Like, what in the world? So you did speak a little bit about stepmoms feeling like, okay, I feel like my ex or my husband is trying to possibly get back with his ex. When you were dating, did your partner ever feel like that? Like, or were you ever asked that? Like, do you still have feelings for her? Or you guys get along now? Like, why don't you guys get back together? Or did that ever come up?
When she was dating, I went on this like self-improvement, dealing with trauma, dealing with baggage mission for, a couple of years. Not 100% specifically because of the breakup or us, our situation, but definitely played into it. And also, when we had split up, I moved out. And what do you do when you split up and you're starting over and you're like 32 years old? I moved. My parents had a 4-bedroom house, so I packed my stuff that I needed and went to my parents' house, to be able to get on my feet and figure out what my next step was, trying to deal with the new reality of being a single dad. And I think like 3 weeks later, 3 weeks within a month after I'd left, and my whole world just crumbled. We had a house together, all these things. And then now all of a sudden, like I'm back at my folks' place and going to work and trying to be, And my dad died unexpectedly, like 3 weeks later. And so then I'm stuck in a very weird place without the emotional intelligence and mental awareness or any of these tools that I have since acquired to really be able to deal with some of these things. Now, my dad and I weren't necessarily close, but it wasn't a deal where didn't get along or anything like that. We just never really created a huge bond or a really strong bond my entire life. I was always sort of closer with my mom. My brother was closer with dad for whatever reason. Now I'm in this house and I still have grief. I'm still grieving the relationship. I'm a single father. I'm trying to deal with my daughter's mother. Everybody else can go back to their lives, whereas I'm still stuck in this house 24 hours a day because I got to deal with my mom's grief. It kind of falls into the deal where it's like, well, if I, maybe not consciously I was thinking this, but, to a certain extent, if I move out, then my mom's completely alone. And so I sort of went into like quite a depression, I guess, or a funk. Basically, all I did for like 2 straight years was just I either was at work or I was hanging out with my daughter. And there was no in between. I didn't really socialize. I didn't go do the barbecues and I didn't go around people. And I just was stuck in this zombie sort of place. And then, my mom had gotten through most of her stuff. And like I said, most of my life, my parents were more like roommates. Like obviously, like they were married and at some point were in, love. After we'd gotten out of school, they'd started doing more things together. But my dad was a bit of a narcissist and kind of passive aggressive, especially towards mom. And there was a lot of chaos in our house and this and that. So, mom grieved and then was out of her grief and sort of processed all that stuff. But I was not still grieving, but sort of just stuck in this habit, like a time loop kind of deal. And so then, she kind of pushed me to quit wasting your life and like, go. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And so then it turned into a deal where it was just like, the more that I processed grief, trauma, baggage from past, the more that other ones came up and triggers and this and that. And then the better I got in certain situations and day to day and clearing out the past and self-worth and all these different things, the easier the co-parenting got, because I was more aware of what I was doing, what triggers me. I didn't engage in behaviors or conversations that I knew would trigger me and or were inappropriate and or this and that, da, 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 da. And when I was done with the relationship, I was just done. You know what I mean? Like, there wasn't any back and forth. There wasn't any thoughts of going back or anything like that. Because of that, it made it easier to move forward. You know what I mean? I didn't dwell on any of the negative stuff, but I also didn't dwell on any of the positive stuff. Like, I got to a place where I had processed everything and gotten more awareness and able to see things for what they were more. And then, you know, I went from being a pretty hard drinker to I don't, you know, drink hardly at all anymore, maybe once a year. Only seeing the good things and holding her on a pedestal, or seeing all the negative things and holding her, you know, at the floor, but seeing that there was things that were good, things that were bad. But I mean, I never had any intention, or there was never even, you know, after a couple months of us being apart, there was never even her husband, boyfriend, you know, at very first, because we were already in this sort of co-parenting relationship. You know, it didn't matter if it's like a 5-minute conversation on the phone, then we call each other. If it's, you know, what time are you picking her up, this and that, then it's just text message. No big deal. After we'd all hung out the very first time, like, whatever little things that maybe were stirring around in his head, you know what I mean, of like worry or, you know, what if kind of situations, like those all kind of went out the window, because like, we don't even talk to each other like we were two people that were together and had a child. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do know what you mean. That's our situation too. Like, my husband and the ex, like, they're so different. Like, I can't even picture them together. And they, same thing, like, when they talk to each other, I'm like, how were you guys ever married? You would think, like, you know, from the outside looking in, you would think that there would be like the secret lingo or whatever.
Right.
And there's not. Yes, you guys do have shared memories of like your kids when they were little, or there were good times. And I think that's really hard for stepmoms to understand, that there were good times. Obviously, at some point in the relationship, like, you got together, there were good enough times for you guys to like have a kid together. And then for whatever reason, the relationship is no longer together. And I think that's a hard hump to like get over. But yeah, then when you interact, it's not that, and maybe this is true for you too. You're not like, oh yes, I can't wait to talk to my kid's mom and go over whatever it is, or, you know, plan out all these things. It's probably not the best part of your day. And it took me a long time to understand that about my husband. He's like, you think I'm ever like, oh, let me go respond to her? I'm like, well, yeah. And he's like, no, I have to do it. It's not something that I'm excited about doing it, but I just have to do it. And you being crazy about it, or you being like, what are you doing? Or, you know, what, now what? Or if you come at me with that attitude, like you were talking about, like the immaturity, you're
getting that attitude back.
Right. He'd be like, I'm doing this because I have to do it.
Right.
I don't want to do it, but this is the reality of the situation. I am divorced. I do have 2 kids that go house to house. I still have to communicate with their mom.
Right. With that, you know, especially in that kind of a situation, you know, if you're a step parent or the parent, I mean, even the parent, I mean, I assume that all step parents have the same thought process, because 95% of the actual parents that I coach and interact with and talk to, you know what I mean? Like, their thought process is, well, when they turn 18 and move out and start their own lives, then I don't have to deal with that other person. And it's like, you are a fucking idiot.
Yeah.
Because like, somebody's going to have to make the choice. Who gets to be there for your first grandkid's birth? Who gets to be at the wedding? Who gets to be at the wedding reception? Who gets to be at the birthday parties for all your grandkids? Who gets to be at the graduations? If you can't sort this shit out, one of you's missing. You know what I mean? And it's probably going to be you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, if you don't sort this out, just assume that you're going to be the one left out of every major milestone in their life, because you thought, I just have to play nice until they graduate high school, and now I can be a holy terror. Get out of your own way and put the kids first. Why are you making your kids have to decide which parent gets to come to a wedding or a graduation or the hospital for the birth? You know what I mean? Like, these are happy moments where you should be like super ecstatic and everybody should be happy for your kids. But instead, they're going to be stressing out about which parent or where to seat the parents because they can't even be in the same room together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a lifetime deal. I mean, just short of something tragic happening, you're connected to that. I'm connected to my daughter's mother for the rest of my life. Like, there is no like, she's on her own and I never have to deal with her. You know what I mean? Like,
you might not have to deal with her day to day, right? Both my
right.
sisters are out of the house, so my son moved in full time, and I'm the one that does the communication with their mom. And like I was telling you before we started recording, when he graduated basic training, we went down to Georgia, and I was like, "Hey, here's the hotel we're staying at. Here are the flights that we're taking. Come stay at our hotel, not with us, but come stay at our hotel." And she's like, "Is that weird?" And I'm like, "It's easier because then he's not like trying to go like hotel to hotel. Like, everyone's just here." We hung out in the same room. We would hang out by the pool, like, and then the night before we left, because they stayed later, like, come to our room, bring all of the food that you've got. Like, we'll just eat and drink our way through like whatever we've got. But it's so much easier. And then even just this summer, we were texting about something, and she said, "Why don't you guys come up?" Like, my daughter and I, 'cause we were talking about animals. She's like, "Why don't you come up? You know, we just got new, whatever." And the fact that like she could just say, "Hey, why don't you just come to my house?" She's been to our house. We've had joint graduation parties here. She used to live in this house. This used to be her house, but it's not worth the turmoil in my relationship with my husband, or even like my relationship with my stepkids, to be like, "Oh my God, I have to like keep her at an arm's length," or whatever. But you're right. Like, once they're out, like, there's going to be a wedding. If they go to college, there's college stuff. If when they have kids, like, you don't, and then like the birthday parties and all of that, like, you don't want them to feel like they have to choose between who's coming and who's going. And whoever they repartner with, that person doesn't know about all of this bullshit that comes with being an extended family unless they're coming from one as well. But like, how fair is it to navigate? Let's say they've got a blended family on that side too, but like 4 sets of parents, and like, okay, well, we have to have a first birthday party for your mom and dad, or for your mom and stepdad, and then for your dad and stepmom, and then my mom and stepdad, and then my stepdad and stepmom. Like, what are we doing here? And so I like the idea of helping people like get back on track. So what are like what are things that people can do to kind of get through that? Obviously, like, work through your own shit, right? But like, like, own it. And like, once you own it, like, no one can use it against you. If you just keep running from it, you're just going to keep running from it. But what are tips or strategies that you've got to help people like get back on track and like, okay, let me put my ego aside?
Don't engage in unhealthy, unprogressive back and forth. If you have a high conflict, or if you're in a high conflict situation, usually it's not because of that person. Like, you're both doing it. You know what I mean? Rarely is one person just losing their minds all the time while you're not doing anything wrong. Not engaging in these things to do the tit for tat, because, you know, if you're in a situation where they want to freak out in the McDonald's parking lot, because that's where you do drop off and pickups, because you can't be near each other, or you move a long ways apart because of spite, and now you got to drive an hour one way, each person does, to meet at this town in the middle to McDonald's or Fred Meyer or whatever. You don't have to sit there while they're losing their minds in the parking lot. You know what I mean? Like, don't talk to them any different than you would talk to your boss, and don't let them talk to you any different than they would talk to your boss or their boss. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to engage in these behaviors when you can start to catch these triggers, because obviously you were together, so they know how to push your buttons and trigger you, right? So once identify your triggers so that you don't get triggered. Don't engage in these behaviors. And if it is a person who is addicted to the chaos or the conflict, or maybe it's not even the chaos and conflict that they're addicted to. Maybe they're addicted to the sympathy that they get when they get home and tell their mother, family, friends that you've set them off in the parking lot at Walmart or whatever. But if you don't give them the reaction that they're looking for, they'll stop looking for it. So like, if they're losing their minds you can just, I mean, it takes practice and it takes time. Obviously, nothing worth it ever. It comes easy, but stay calm, cool head. Say, this is not the way adults speak to each other. Get in your car and fucking drive off. You don't have to sit there and let them just lose their mind and cause a big ass scene. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But so that's a big one, because when you stop giving them that reaction or fuel that fire or add into the chaos, they'll stop looking for it, because they're not going to get the reaction that gives them whatever benefit that they're looking for, whether it be the sympathy or look at all these people around that are seeing this because you're an asshole, I'm passive aggressive, whatever, you know. And then communicating and holding clear boundaries is also a big one, which with the boundaries, you know, you're talking about, I mean, there's a lot of things that can go involved in it. But number one is you got to be able to communicate boundaries, because nobody's a mind reader. You can't set boundaries, not express them to somebody, and then get pissed at them for not respecting your boundaries, right? I mean, that's the same as in any sort of life situation. But quit with the double standards. That's usually a big one that people get in a lot of trouble with. If you don't want them Facebook stalking you, don't Facebook stalk them.
Yeah.
If you don't want them driving by your house on the weekends, don't drive by their house to see whose car's in the driveway when you have the kids. And there was a couple things that we did that tends to be like these huge problematic situations for everybody. And inadvertently, we'd set these two, boundaries or agreements, right? Hugely successful, but you have to be very careful about where your mental space is, because you could actually really cause a lot of chaos if you don't sort of follow your own guidelines. Mm-hmm. So the first one was, if I start dating somebody or she starts dating somebody and it starts to get serious enough where they are going to potentially start being in my daughter's life or around my daughter, we get to meet that person before they ever get brought around my daughter. So there was never a surprise. Look who lives at my house now. Mm-hmm. Mom's got a new boyfriend, and, she comes home from her weekend at mom's, and mom's got a boyfriend that lives at the house. And it's like, I didn't even know she was dating somebody. And now there's just some strange dude around my daughter all the time, and vice versa. You know what I mean? Like, if I start dating somebody and it starts becoming more than dating, then she meets her before I start bringing her around my daughter. I should be able to get a feel for somebody before they're going to be in my daughter's life. Same for her. Now, you have to give that respect to get that respect, right? But you also you can't meet the other person and intentionally try to sabotage their relationship because you don't want to see that other person happy, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's you have to be in a place to where you can actually be an adult and see that person as potentially being a good fit for him or her, rather than, oh my God, they're going to get in my way, and now I got to compete with this person or battle with this person, whatever. We'd set up the arrangement that we got first call. So if it wasn't my weekend and my daughter's mother called me up, was like, hey, so-and-so just called or text me, somebody else is in town, they're all going out tonight, there's a concert at the local place or whatever, are you busy? If I'm not busy, which, why wouldn't you want more time with your kids, right? I'll take all the time I can get, which she comes and goes as she pleases. It's never been that big of an issue, and so that was the deal. We get first call, and then it's like, well, no, I'm busy, I got something going on. You call your parents, I'll call my mom. We'll see if we can find somebody to babysit, And that worked really well as well, because I could call her and be like, hey, so-and-so is in town. I didn't know. He just called me up. He wants to go hang out, yada, yada, yada. If you're not busy, can she come and hang out with you tonight? Mm-hmm. Whatever, right? But again, you have to be an adult and not throw that in their face later Or, well, if you don't want your, if you know, typically it's more women that do this than men because women have more of the quote unquote perceived control. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
it's like, well, if you don't want your kids on your weekends, then maybe you shouldn't have them next time. And it's like,
Yeah.
everybody's allowed to have a life. You know what I mean? When
Yeah.
you were married, it was no big deal for you to tell your husband, hey, I need you to take the kids to go get ice cream because I just need a couple hours. Right.
Hmm.
Right. Like
Yeah.
it's no big
Yeah.
deal when you're married. Like that's normal. Right. Or the husband could do the same thing, be like, hey, I've had a stressful week at work. I just cannot, the chaos and the noise. Like I need like 3 or 4 hours. I'm going to go golfing or I'm going to go fishing. I just need to find a,
So right though.
decompress or whatever. You know what I mean? And it's okay when you're married, but now all of a sudden that you're not married, it's like this huge, oh, well, you're a fucking piece of shit. You're a shitty dad. You don't even want to be around your kids. You know what I mean? And you start getting all these things thrown at you that life happens. Everybody's allowed to have a life. And so,
Yeah.
not having double standards, and those are two that are, the double standards kind of come into play a lot because I want you to accept my new boyfriend. But when we meet your new girlfriend, I'm going to be a complete terror and be as disrespectful as I possibly can so that it runs her off because I don't want the competition because that I'm the mother. Nobody else is going to come in and try to take over and raise my daughter. You know what I mean? Like you can't see it through that lens. You have to be, you know what I mean? Quit competing.
What do you
And
think
that's
that
that
is?
that plays in it.
Why do you think, like, I feel like dads and stepdads just get along, like, it's easy.
Right.
Like, there's not that
Mm-hmm.
competition piece, so to speak. I mean, maybe to a degree there is, but like with stepmoms and moms, there is that competition piece. It's almost like this turf war of like,
I'm the
I
mom.
control him or I run him or yeah.
Right. It's probably one or a combination of, a lot of different areas, a lot of what if about it, but also a lot of conditioning and also a lot of societal pressure. There's more societal pressure. I mean, you know, you see in the news like Lenny Kravitz and Jason Momoa got along just fine.
Hmm. Hmm.
No big deal, right? And you see it, and not that necessarily anybody that's a famous Hollywood actor should be idolized or anything like that, but there are some aspects of different, but you see it a lot more often in the case of the men than the women. But you're also seeing it right now. It culturally or societal, it's more accepted for men to build each other up and support each other, whereas women think that they're very supportive of each other when they're really not. I mean, look at all this stuff going on with that rookie basketball girl.
Hmm.
Like every other female athlete in the WNBA is taking every chance that they can to try to cut her down instead of recognizing what she's doing for the sport and doing for all of them.
Hmm.
And instead of just making the competition better and trying to play against her, they're using every chance that they can get to like, oh, well, you shouldn't be on the Olympic team.
Hmm.
When your stats are just as good as everybody else, you're too young.
Hmm.
But Canada is like, come play for us. You're a dual citizen.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's sort of, but you always see that. You see that even with women in friends groups, they're always competing with each other, and it's a competition of it's sort of ingrained from childhood or whatever that you you need to be in control. Most people who don't have control have the psychological need to try to control everything. But also, what if he meets somebody that makes more money than me, that's a better wife than I was, that's a better mother, maybe she's a better mother.
Yeah.
Maybe she'll be able to maybe she'll support him, be more supportive of him, and he'll take his business farther than he ever dreamed of with me. And my kids are going to look up to her more. I mean, it could be a million different reasons.
Just hearing you like talk through this made me think last night I was at an event with some other women.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know any of them. And they were all realtors, but they were all
Mm-hmm.
very loving and kind and supportive. And they were talking shop. And I was just like a fly on the wall, like listening to their conversation and like hanging out with them. But the thing that's coming up, like with you talking, is insecurity.
Right. Right.
And so I think that, and this sounds weird, but like a lot of times women are just insecure in their relationships. It's very often that I mean, it's not that often that you have like a group of women that can hang out where there isn't that competition. And it
Right.
takes a lot of strong, confident women to just be able to be supportive. And there's not like an ulterior motive or a hidden
Right.
agenda or whatever. Where I feel like men, it's a lot easier to just like be, where
Right.
we're always like the mental gymnastics of like keeping up with whatever the case may be. Man, I wonder what it's like to be a man. I'm just kidding.
Well, it's,
Sometimes I think it's easier,
but
but there's other challenges.
I guess, but women
And a lot of
probably
times we put it on
have a lot
ourselves.
more scrutiny against themselves,
Yeah.
as far as like,
Like you said, maybe they're a better wife or a better mom or a better whatever. Like there's always
well,
this.
I mean, think about it like this. So like in your scenario where you were talking earlier about, coming in as the stepmom and having the parents, like, well, she gave me grandkids. We love her more. Da, 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 da. And all these like
And I'm 16 years old.
jabs, like all these pokes and jabs, whether they're really intentional or not, there's some truth behind all of these things, right? If they're said or implied and da, 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 da. If the mom is remarried, right? Do you think that the stepdad is getting any of those comments by family, by friends, by the other people involved? No, he just gets to be him,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
He's at peace because he just has to. I mean, unless he's a POS or a deadbeat, or there's some sort of reasoning for them to judge that man, he's not getting the same scrutiny
Hmm.
from all of the other people involved. You know what I mean? And so that's sort of the cultural and viewpoint. You know what I mean? That's kind of a difference, and so it makes it easier for the men to not have. I mean, if you're confident and secure as a man, I mean, I'm not saying all men, because if somebody's wildly insecure about maybe their attributes as a dad or ability to provide or any of those sort of scenarios, then you might get a little animosity between, new dad that makes six figures compared to a real dad that makes $32,000 a year. He can take my kids on all kinds of trips with her, and you know what I mean? And then it becomes competition or whatever like that. But like the scrutiny isn't the same from everybody else that's involved. But the old adage of show me your friends and I'll show you who you are, and that you're the average of the five people that you spend the most time around.
Yeah.
If you put five dudes in a room that are just hanging out talking about dad stuff, they're more likely to talk about the positive attributes of being a dad. And they'll tell each other, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. When I was, starting this and doing this and they got to this age, then, this is how I kind of navigated this situation, da, 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 da. Well, women aren't going to necessarily be like that. If you put five of them, six of them in a room, it tends to turn more negative and be sort of a
Bitch fest.
round table of why her husband's a POS compared to this one's ex-husband, and you know what I mean? So it's,
Yeah, I always find that interesting. I was talking to one of my girlfriends about that recently, and she was like, one thing I like about you is that I can talk to you about whatever is going on in my life, and you're not like, oh my God, are you okay? Like you're like, you don't just like go worst case scenario. I'm like, life happens, man. Like
right,
everyone has good days, everyone has bad days. I have good days, I have bad days. My husband has good days, bad days. My daughter has good days, bad days. You have good days, bad days. Like it
right,
doesn't mean that like you hate your kids or your marriage is over or you are
right.
hate yourself or whatever. Like that's cool. Like, but yeah, I totally hear what you're saying. I'm very cautious on like what I say to certain friends because yeah,
Mm-hmm.
just like straight off the deep end. Oh my gosh,
Right.
this has been awesome though. Like I literally could talk to you about this all day long. So I'm like, you have like a really good beat on all things like co-parenting. So where can people find you? What do you offer? How do you help people?
On Instagram is usually the place I just coach. I don't do the courses or the web pages or a
Yeah.
lot of stuff online. Online's just kind of a waste of time to me. It's not something I love, so I just don't do a lot of it.
Mhm.
But Instagram's usually the place that filters all, if somebody's got questions or wants to contact me, that's the place I kind of check the messages.
Perfect. So I will link that all in the show notes. But thank you so much, JP. I appreciate your help.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate
You're
it.
welcome. Thanks for taking time to listen to this week's episode. If anything was helpful or resonated with you, please share it on social media and tag me. I'm just at Alicia Krasko. And if you could leave a 5-star rating and a review while you're at it, that would also be really helpful. And if you find yourself struggling with your stepmom journey and you want a little bit more support without the hefty price tag of coaching, you might want to check out the Stepmom Side community, which is my own private community for stepmoms, where you get to connect with other stepmoms around the world and myself, where I hold weekly office hours and monthly group coaching. It's kind of like you have your own personal coach in your own back pocket. Again, without that hefty price tag. See you next week.